Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Amartya Singh, co founder and CEO of FinFlow, a product built by and for mid and modern finance teams. We're super excited and pumped to welcome you to the season opener of our podcast, Inside the CFO Office, an exclusive channel for finance professionals to know more about the journey of finance leaders and trailblazers in the CFO office and the biggest challenges that they have faced and solved, their journeys and their take on the future of finance. In today's episode, we have as a first guest Rachel Camarillo to share with us her journey beyond balance sheets. Rachel heads finance and accounting at Filson. She has more than 25 years of in depth experience managing and leading finance and accounting teams across industries like retail, hospitality, manufacturing, and others. Rachel was honored in 2021 as the Puget Sound's 40 under 40 and is also the founder of the Women in Manufacturing Washington chapter, empowering women in the industry. Most importantly, Rachel is someone I've really looked up to and really loved speaking to her for her thoughts and advice. Like me and many others, Rachel has supported and encouraged and is fondly called sunshine in the human form.
Thank you.
Welcome,
Thank you
Rachel.
for having me.
Right. So I think let's dig into the podcast. Really great to have you over here, and looking forward for our viewers to know a lot more about you, about your journey, and your take and on the current and on the future of the finance world. So as a first question, which is it's a personal question, would love to know more about your journey. I mean, especially starting from an accounting assistant to all the way up to heading finance and accounting at Wilson and Erin as two of the biggest, greatest firms there are. How has been your journey? What are the biggest challenges that you have faced, and what are the biggest learnings? Over to you, and would love to know
Yeah.
a lot
Thank
more
you.
about
Well,
your
so
journey.
I was super curvy, worvy, not the traditional. A lot of my friends out of college went straight to auditing with some big accounting firms, and I decided to kind of go the other route because my brain doesn't really take to tax legislation regulation. While I can do it and everything, it kind of was daunting to me. So I started working ops and kind of fell in love with that business side of finance. I started working when I was young, and maybe this was an influence in why I decided to not go into auditing, was because I started working with my mom and my aunts as a little child in our little business, making kitchen pot holders and sets of like washcloths and stuff, and we would paint all of the flowers and pictures, and then we would screen print them, sew them, and then sell them. And from that, it was kind of like beginning to end of the entire process, and I loved it. And I think that was the foundation. Although coming out of high school, I really didn't attribute anything to learning from that. It was just like, oh God, this is what we have to do this weekend. Mom, we have to go sew some more things. So I started doing that when I was young. In high school, I worked all through high school as well, trying to help support my family and save up for college. And so I did retail at a grocery store where I learned how to open and close tills, do pricing audits and merchandising for different sections of the stores. And that was kind of cool. And now I'm working back in retail. So that I kind of draw on that experience. Through college, I worked as well just to kind of get through. It's food service, hospitality, and some random accounting jobs. And then right after high school, like I said, I didn't go into auditing. I went into accounting at Redline Hotels, which was based in Spokane at the time. And what's interesting is that while some of my friends were auditing, I was on the other side, inside the business, actually running the audits. So I did everything from basic accounting entry when I first started, all the way up to running our compliance and our our quarterly audits with our auditors, and help implement our ERP system, do SEC reporting. I think I was really lucky at Redline to be exposed to the whole spectrum of everything, from the daily things at the hotels and restaurants all the way up to consolidation and SEC reporting and board reporting. And that was amazing. I think that 9 years or whatever I was there was really formative. To I have really good mentors and took advantage of every opportunity. Always said, yes, let's go. Yes, let me try it. Didn't know what I was getting into. Some of the things I remember from back then, do you do this too? Like you replay some of the conversations and you're like, I can't believe I did that. That was dumb. But, you live and learn and you just got to go. So that was me, post college.
Right.
I was there, worked my way up through there. But I think what was fun about that time was while I was having a corporate job, I also had a restaurant career at the same time. So I kind of had a dual life, and I would go into work and to my corporate job at Red Lion, and then afterwards I would go out and actually run restaurants and help other people open and close their restaurant locations. And that was, I say the word fun because it was so fun, but the amount of learning I did in that time where I was being mentored on one end in the corporate environment and then putting into place all of the things that I was learning real time and running businesses and developing my leadership style, how to talk to employees, how to train them, how to actually do the doing that I was actually leading at the corporate office, two different businesses, but just being able to kind of play around with that and say, okay, that's not right. Okay, pivot. Okay, don't do this. Okay, yeah. And it was like a dual life, you know, suits and jackets, super professional SEC reporting, and then go out dancing on the bars, entertaining people. Like, I mean, not dancing on the bars, but you know what I mean? Like, it was fun. After a while, I decided to leave Spokane. Redline was moving their headquarters over to Denver, and I kind of wanted to be closer to the west end of the states as well because my family is still in Hawaii. So I moved over to Seattle and started brand new. I got into manufacturing, and that's when a whole new world opened for me, where it was okay, I've got this finance stuff down. Now I'm going to apply it to something else. It was my real like challenge of okay, here's a company that wants to get back and grow from 5 million to 20, 30, 40 million. How do we do that? Right? And a new industry, new terms, new everything. So that was a big flip, a big change. And I grew really, that was an awesome experience to learn about the manufacturing piece. And that's where I fell in love with manufacturing, then started the Women in Manufacturing chapter here in Washington because I needed some support, right? And one of the big things about going through industry changes is you can't do it if you don't have support or resources around you to learn quickly and spool up to the terminology. In finance, you can apply it to any business,
Right.
but it's the terminology of the specific business that's going to make or break your ability to make an impact, right? So you got to learn it really fast. So created that environment so that I could spool up really fast and kind of make and add value to the company. After Northstar, I took a stint in aviation because through all of my workings with manufacturing, Seattle, big aviation, right? Boeing, everything. And, Northstar was based next to Boeing Field. There's planes everywhere. So I just got really, really fascinated by the world of aviation. And they needed someone who would, hey, can we find a person that has hospitality experience for people, can talk to people, manage big contracts, but also manage the heavy industrial machinery that we have, like these planes. I was like, me, I can do that. Like, that's literally me. I don't know why, but I fell into it, and that's totally me. And I loved it. It was
Right.
hospitality mixed with all these little event planning things because I do some weddings on the side and event planning. So it was like a mini event every day, right, with your planes. And then you have these large contracts that you're managing. It was like basically 9 to 12 businesses that you're managing because every aircraft you manage. And you have to look long lead and get all the parts and understand the maintenance schedules and the FAA regulations. It was just like to understand what it takes for
Right.
one flight to go up in the air smoothly, it really humbles you and it really makes you
Right.
empathetic to some of the chaos that you experience at the airport every time you travel. You care more about what goes into
Right.
that. So that was a really
Right.
cool experience. And then now I'm at Filson, another industry turn back into retail. Got an opportunity to kind of work with them, and it's my first experience working with a PE firm that's based out in Detroit. And I'm running the finance and accounting department, helping them move through this period of transition with implementing a new ERP system and setting up internal controls. So, I mean, that's
Right.
really me. And I think for me, I'm a generalist with a finance focus. I can take the
Right.
finance piece because I majored in that. I got it. I can do everything from beginning to
Right.
end, but then also take that and then go into the business to say, okay, is that going to work? How procedurally is that going
Right.
to play out with the people who are doing the work? So that's kind of my view on
Right.
things.
Okay. Great, great, Rachel. I mean, wow. I mean, great experience across different sectors and industry. I think, I mean, two, three big takeaways from your experience, right? One of the thing was telling yes to multiple, problem statement and challenges, and that's a big thing, right? So because sometimes what happens is when you work in your career in a particular job, you see your job, your career panning out in a particular way, right? You're happy with it, you're contented with it, but once opportunities start coming, it's very important to say yes to those opportunities, yes to those question marks and the the challenges that come in, because when you started saying yes, you understand a lot more about, it declutters that mind, that thought within your mind to solve business problems, to understand, okay, this is the problem, this is how I need to approach it, and this is how I need to solve it. That process flow becomes more and more clearer as you start working on these problems. And more importantly, it creates a window of multiple opportunities, right? It opens up multiple frontiers, right? And that's really worked for you. Really, I mean, amazed by your your ability to work across different industries and say yes to multiple problems. And the other big takeaways is, I think, the what you really mentioned and focused on in the role of mentors, that you had multiple mentors who actually guided you and what could be done. And I'm sure that across your experience, you've worked with multiple mentors who have given you the guidance, and it also shows in your keenness and to work with people and guide them and
Yeah,
become their mentors, like
pay
the
it back.
paid forward kind of an approach. And that's really
I
right,
think
and
you,
that's
you
really
brought a
lovely
really
about you
good
and
point
really
in the saying yes piece. And it's interesting as you get older, when you're growing up, people say, oh, you'll understand when you're older. Don't worry about it. You'll understand when you're older. You
right,
really do. When you look back at your career,
right,
saying yes, when you don't say yes
right,
early on, I
right,
can't imagine where I'd be if I hadn't said yes, right? I'd still be kind of like this, and I wouldn't
right,
have known what to do. What saying yes in the beginning allows you to
right,
do is now when you're mid career to late career, you're going to be able to say no to all the things you don't want to do because life is so short. You've got to get your
right,
niche in there. So without saying no,
right,
without saying yes early on, you won't know what it really is that fuels you. So that's a really good point, I think, to
right.
bring up.
Right, right. I mean, great. Totally agreed on your. I mean, your focus on paying it forward. Really great thing, and that's why we. I mean, thanks for your help to us as well on multiple aspects. Going to the next question, a little bit more on the business side, right? I mean, post 2020, right, cash flows has become really important, right? And from that aspect, there are multiple. We are also seeing that there are multiple outdated practices, outdated technology, and manual time intervention, time intensive processes are happening, right? So from this perspective, I wanted to know post 2020, what are the changes and challenges in cash flow management that has been seen, especially for finance leaders, and how have you navigated it?
Cash is king, right? And if you don't plan around it, you're going to be in trouble.
Right,
Um, and I think one of the things that's interesting is you can't work in a vacuum. When you look around with the people that you're
right,
working with, if everyone is just heads down in their own business, I don't think you're going to
right,
make it. You have to pay attention to what your clients are doing, what the temperature is like. Are people going to, like, when I first started, I think I started at Air and Air 1 week before the city lockdown and you need to stay home. And I just got hired in
right,
a charter company and we travel and take people everywhere and no one's going anywhere. So what does that mean to cash? We have nothing coming in for the next 3 months. So it was interesting in trying to navigate. We have no income until the lockdown is over. What are we going to do? We literally can't sell anything online. Our service is to take people places.
right,
And so, really doing long-term planning. And I think before, some businesses are like, okay, what's going to happen the next month? Okay, move on. What's going to happen in the next month? Move on. And you've got to get your team to understand long-term, right? And plan out years and do stress test analysis on how far can we push the business and what can we do to the existing
right,
contracts that we have to make sure that they're updated to reflect our costs, right? So I think I've had the pleasure of working with older companies, that historical companies that have been around for a while. And you've got to go back and keep updating those things. It's not a set it and forget it. It's an annual review of what does
right,
this contract look like? When we signed it, here's the position the company was in. Are we in that position now? How can we
mm,
make it right for the client and us to adjust so that we both win? right? So that long-term strategy of looking at everything, it really makes you think of your business differently because you
Mhm.
don't know. You know, you've got to have a savings. You've got to have that buffer. Transparency is one of the biggest
Right.
things I think getting through that time period. What I think helped us survive in that period was the transparency, everyone understanding and following the dollar. How does what every person does affect our profitability? And putting it into terms of our
Right.
aircraft detailer to our maintenance person to our AR assistant, what do you do that's going to make that more positive? And when you flow it out, it was magic.
Right.
It was really magic. You're like, oh, if I do this
Right.
differently, that's going to yield us $1 versus losing five, right? And so when cash is strained, I think going back to the basics, it can be so powerful because you just assume that people know, they understand how they contribute to the bottom line, and that's low hanging fruit. You don't have to spend for that.
Right.
That's just talking and educating and being transparent about things, and I think that really saved us. Yeah.
Right. Got it. No, I mean, one of the interesting points that you mentioned is about the respect for dollar. I love that. I mean, love that phrase which you mentioned, because it means a lot, right? I mean, if you see fundamentally from a company's perspective, you have your executive board, your executive team, like this, the CEO, the CFO, and the CBO, CRO, all the heads, executive roles, and maybe, people minus one below them. But it's very important, as you rightly said, the responsibilities for dollar, responsibility for the cash flow resides with everybody, because in that case people do not just focus on cost, they focus on what are my ultimately my
Yeah.
cash flow management, right? So that, I mean, a great point, and I think that's what, thanks for bringing it on in terms of the overall company wise collective responsibility towards cash flows, right? From finance team also, I've seen that, from the perspective over the last couple of decades, finance teams have also worked towards making the entire, the financial acumen or the financial performance of a company be a collective responsibility across the company, and that's also something that has been really happening, right? And yeah, I mean, thanks for the answer. Taking a step back, right? I mean, across your while you have been managing and leading finance functions, you have seen a lot, right? We talked about across industries, experience across the industries. We have seen the length and breadth of processes. We have seen the problems that you have faced. We have seen the growth stories. You must have seen a lot of growth, upwards growth trajectory at firms, right? I wanted to speak on two of the biggest challenges that you had faced and how you navigated those challenges. What was your approach and how did you go about those
I think it was
challenges?
interesting, and it's not even related specifically to finance in specifically.
Right.
I mean, I come at it with a finance lens. And as a leader, the higher you go in your career, the more influence you have over how we do little things in the business. And one of the biggest challenges I see,
Right.
even with companies that I work for, but also companies that I've helped on the side through my side hustles, is you go in there and you to,
Right.
how we work is almost more important as what we're doing, right? Like we're making clothes, we're selling
Right.
flights, we're doing,
Right.
we're running hotels, whatever that may be. But how we're doing it is
Right.
super important. And the
Right.
resources, like quantify things. Quantify, you sit in a meeting and you say, how much is this meeting costing the business? You know? And we're doing it weekly. And what is the
Right.
outcome? And so you take that and you put it into
Right.
finance terms and you're saying, hey, if we're looking to be more efficient with our dollar and we're looking for, let's
Right.
turn our resources into value added activities. Let's go chase the dollar instead of wasting it
Right.
sitting here talking, right? And so it's kind of like
Right.
applying these lean principles of manufacturing into back office procedures. And I'll tell you that the again, low
Right.
hanging fruit, right? Because from the CFO office, you're always like, okay, I got to spend money to make money. But there's so much stuff when you take off
Right.
the cover and you open it up and you're like, these are the things that a lot of people don't want to talk about. Because it's like, how do we run a meeting? How are
Right.
we talking and passing the
Right.
baton between departments? Where are the reworks
Right.
happening? We go from
Right.
here to here, and then we got to go rework, and then all the way back, and then rework, and all the way back. So let's talk about that because that's where you can really, really transform your resources because we're being asked to do more with less, right? So I think across the board,
Right.
it's been mapping out redundancies, finding redundancies, working smarter, not harder, and building a bench
Right.
throughout that process. You're going through it to understand what the business
Right.
can improve on, but also trying to identify
Right.
who's next to take my role,
Right.
because you're not going to grow unless you have someone to give your work to. And sometimes it means you work yourself out of a
Right.
job, which I've done. Like there's no place for me here anymore because these people are awesome. They can take it over, and okay, time for a next adventure. That
Right.
good or bad, but for me, it's
Hmm.
how do you bring and elevate others around you, and it's just more learning for you.
Right.
So I mean, across the board, it's really low hanging fruit. How are we working, and how can we work smarter so that we can achieve goals? Because the more you grow, the more you scale. If your systems aren't supporting that, you're going to get into way big trouble later, right?
Right.
So I think
Right.
that's the biggest
Right.
thing that I've seen.
Got it. I mean, one very interesting thing you mentioned about, I mean, I love the podcast, by the way. You mentioned another thing, chase the dollars. I mean, brilliant. Because you are coining new words that can be the future of finance, right? Chase the dollars, right? You mentioned about the outcome driven approach. I love that thing, right? Because problems are diverse, right? So there are some kind of problems which are like, real, I mean, problems which you're facing in the day to day work. And there are some problems that you're anticipating will happen in the future. And there are some problems which you know somewhere that it is happening, but you do not have the bandwidth, or you don't have the budget, or you do not have XYZ reasons you do
Right.
not want to solve it, right? In all these problems, outcome driven approach really helps, because when you are chasing an outcome, it automatically handles all these problems
Right.
and how you want to solve it. You define the outcome, and the problem statement comes in, then you solve. And really love that approach in terms of outcome. I mean, how do you drive every problem statement, every challenges
Yep.
around an outcome? Really great. Thanks for sharing that thought. And coming to a little bit on the scaling, right? You have worked across different shapes and sizes of firms, right? So, and you have also been, tracking. You have a lot of friends and a lot of peers in the finance network and different shapes and sizes of firms, right? So as companies scale from 10 to 100 to 500 to $1 billion in revenue, wanted to know a little bit more about your thoughts on the finance technology landscape, especially in terms of finance technology, right? One thing interesting point you mentioned about the ERP transformational project that you had taken up, right? Would love to know more about what is your take on the finance technology landscape change, and also about the ERP transformation project that
Yeah,
you
I
were
think
talking about.
I mean, there's so many programs out there now, and I can tell you that
Right,
sitting in a seat where I get a lot of information from various new platforms and everything that's popping up, it can be really daunting to decide
right,
what is right for my
mm,
business, right? And some
right,
there's
right,
some people are like, no, we don't need anything, and no, we're fine with this. But the technology has improved so much, and if you're on a system that is older than, I don't know, 2000 something, it's archaic, right? It's so archaic, and the technology has improved, so you've got to get on a system that is can be collect the data but pump the data back out so that you can use the data, right? And I
right,
think there's a lot
right,
of people that have this thought of like, systems are going to replace me, AI this and blah 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 blah. And I'm like, no, systems are meant to
right,
supplement our talents, not replace us, right? It's meant to
right,
take, hey,
right,
before we used to have to book all of our appointments and send 25 emails to each person on when is available. Well, now there's a tool to do that, and we don't have to do that. It's one email, go out. Or we can dump our GL data into
right,
Workday, and now we can have our analytics and our stress testing there versus doing manual models, which are prone to
right,
error. One thing I
right,
think that's really, really necessary for a finance team in this day and age is a roadmap of what their goal is, where they're going to
right,
be, so that you can
right,
map out your systems of how these systems integrate. Actually, and it's not just like
right,
little lines. It's this when this happens, this happens, and it's that whole like, what's the trigger? Okay, this is not going to integrate correctly because this is going to break. This integration happens when this happens. Avalera connects to this, and it calls, like, it's very nitty gritty, so that when you get calls and potential opportunities to implement a new system, or a new type of technology, you're prepared to say, how can I slot that in, right? There's a lot of people like, oh, let's do this. This is so cool. It's nice and shiny and new. And you're like, we're still on a system that doesn't even have an open API. No, we can't do that. No, it doesn't
Right.
connect. It would be another one person to manually upload that and verify that
Right.
the information is together. So we have to really strategically map it out and understand that. And if you as a CFO don't understand that system and how those things work,
Right.
and maybe that's why I never really realized it until talking right now, but maybe that's why IT rolls into the CFO a lot of times. That makes sense now. I always wondered why IT,
Yeah.
why does IT come with the CFO? I don't know, but I guess that makes sense. You just had an aha moment for me. Okay. But I think that roadmap is important, right? Because when you're trying to scale
Right.
from 5 million to 100 million, okay, how are you going to do that? You can't necessarily hire 200 more people. It's going to be system driven. You're going to have to rely on the system. And in this day and age,
Right.
we have so much data, but what do we do with the data? I don't
Right.
know. Like, it's just there.
Right.
And it's like, it's gold if you can put it
Right.
into a good platform to make informed decisions.
Right. I mean, I loved your answer. I think couple of points which were really great, and it shows that you are a technology-driven, finance head. You mentioned couple of things. One is the need to go beyond legacy systems. You mentioned, you're working with 2000 systems. You use modern tech, and which use modern technology and are built on, modern architecture. It's more aligned to the problem statements that you're working upon, and more importantly, it's also integrable with the current systems that you have, because the broad assumption is that all the products are increasing in their, in their modern, becoming more modern and more solving more
Yeah.
relevant problems, right? So that's where legacy product stack is one major problem. So the second is very interesting. I didn't expect, and you mentioned about open APIs, and that's a brilliant point, because we see, I mean, from finance ecosystem, right? You look at overall evolution across the finance teams, there is a certain concept of using things on the desktop, right? You're having a dashboard, you're having a software. APIs makes it more cloud based, makes it much more scalable, much more replicable, because it's all over the back end. The manual intervention decreases because something is happening behind. So it's much more modernistic approach to have an open API based methodology. So I mean, great. I mean, those 2 points were really great in terms of understanding what is the technology driven architecture. From my experience also, I've seen the challenges. And one point you mentioned
Yeah.
about the roadmap, right? As firms start growing, right, roadmap becomes really important. And I also seen my experience from after speaking with finance heads and CFOs. One of the major challenges is, when firms start scaling, right, multiple things happen. Your revenue is increasing, your customer
Right.
count is increasing, complications are increasing, right? You're using an ERP, you are using, let's say, an ERP like a NetSuite, you're using a CRM like a Salesforce. Your billing systems are becoming more and more complicated. You're moving from prepaid to postpaid. Payments are sometimes coming in, are sometimes coming in through some other means. The processes becomes more complicated. People find it more difficult to handle. Technology, you're using different technology, right? You're using an ERP, CRM, you want to use the receivable product, you want to use the payable product, an FP&A product, a treasury product. There
Yeah.
are so many different products, right? So from that perspective, right, from that perspective, the roadmap becomes very important, because then when you are able having a grip on your revenue increase, revenue scaling, you have a grip on your customer count increase, on the employee count increase, you can actually decide on what product you want to scale and how you want to invest in building the right product. And that was a great point with regards to roadmap. That is the most simple but yet so
Right.
powerful explanation of how to actually scale technical infrastructure, right? One question on the ERP transformation. I mean, you had talked about a ERP transformation project that you had done, right? How was your experience? I mean, in a few words, if you can tell us, how was your
Well, I've
experience in
done
the
some
ERP transformation
ERP
project?
work in multiple businesses, and I will say that they're painful. They're super painful. I will tell you
Right.
that, from right now, one of the biggest challenges is the overall the cost investment in that, right? The system
Right.
that we are
Right.
on right now
Right.
at Philson, we're just going to start on an ERP implementation. And the system that we're using is from
Right.
2012, super old and very archaic,
Right.
doesn't really talk. The integrations fail multiple times a day. It's very manual work. And I think one of the
Right.
things that, you know, people overlook again is a simple mapping. And I go back to mapping all the time because it's super visual. It's the way my brain
Right.
works. But
Right.
What tends to happen
right,
is we go, okay, we can't do this and we can't do this because we have this system and this system. I'm like, but what is our goal? What's the
right,
outcome? Again, back to the outcome. What do we
right,
want to happen? Right. And so when we're thinking about
right,
a
right,
new ERP system, some people are like, well, that's not how we do it. Let's customize this. That's not how we do it. We need this. And I'm like,
right,
let's look at what is canned in the system because we could probably
right,
maneuver our processes to what's canned in there and just say, is that really needed? Is there another way we can get that data? We're
right,
doing that process because this system is so old, it can't
right,
report on it if we don't do this.
right,
But if we just scrap
right,
that, look
right,
at our ERP system that we want to go to and
right,
say, okay, this is our new world. What do we need? We need to be able to report on this, this, and this. So, do these things even matter anymore?
right,
They don't, right? And that's the
right,
hard,
right,
annoying work
right,
that some people don't want to do. It's just like, it's easy to just say, here's what we do, make it work the same way, right? But you're trying with
right,
the goal is to simplify, do more with less, and
right,
look at the system in a way that,
right,
oh, this is a brand new thing. What band aids can we take off that
right,
have accumulated? Can we
right,
take off that we can just say, that's no longer necessary?
uh,
And that can be so freeing,
right,
but it's hard to get people in that mindset of like,
right,
no, this is how I've been doing it for 20 years.
right,
No, no. It's like, no,
right,
other people do it. It's okay. Let's let go. Let's just leave it all away and then let's start with a blank board. So I think that
right,
don't
right,
customize as much as possible, like use the
right,
standard fields, use the standard processes, and then make use of all of the workflow processes that are built into the system before, and see how it works before you start customizing. I think that's a big thing because that's where it
right.
gets costly you know
Right. No, I agree with regards to the cost implications of having an additional customization because it's investment of time, effort, money. It requires, and you also need to, I mean, as a company, you also need to develop that intent to actually go about it, which is an
yeah.
even bigger problem, right? Completely agreed, right? Right. And one interesting point you mentioned is about, change, right? And one of the biggest change that is happening is, and you also mentioned about systems replacing people, right? How do you give that comfort within the organization? And one of the biggest things that, I mean, this is a question that is an obvious question, is artificial intelligence, right? And machine learning. And that's one of the biggest pointers that is there in all industries, and especially in the finance industry. We have also been, working on multiple applications of AI/ML, very interesting use cases there. But what I wanted to know from you is that what is your take on artificial intelligence? Do you see there is a relevant use case of application in finance? And how do you see the overall, AI ecosystem panning out? Maybe let's talk about simple as applications like a predictive AI. Let's say, I mean, generative AI is always there, but let's talk about predictive AI. Do you believe artificial intelligence in general is going to, make an impact in the
I think
finance
it does, and
functions?
I think it will, and I think it already does, right? And I'm no expert, and I think
Right.
that the word, when people throw out AI, they get really like, oh gosh, I'm super scared. Like, what does that mean? But we're using it right now, right, all the time, right? SAP
Right.
Concur. Concur is a common thing that we're all using,
Right.
and you're not realizing that that's actually
Right.
the program recognizing the invoice number and the date and who it's
Right.
going to go to, who it's going to route to, like all of that. That's a part of AI, right? So I think people are
Right.
just like, AI, robot, take over my job. I don't now exist. But that's not what it is. It's really making your life easier.
Right.
And I get that there's dangers,
Right.
but using it smartly, right? So if I go in and I do generative AI and I ask a
Right.
question, what are the three things that I need to be involved? Like when I started with Philston, I literally did this. I said, tell me about
Right.
retail, explain it to me like I'm a 6 year old, and what are the
Right.
biggest things. And
Right.
you read some of it, but then you're like, okay, now I'm going to go do more research on these topics. It should be it's generative, it's
Right.
generating ideas. It shouldn't
Right.
be your idea.
Right.
It should help you, give you cookie crumbs
Right.
to where you need to go, right? So that's like one aspect of AI, I
Right.
guess. For me, I
Right.
kind of struggle with, okay, how do you get people comfortable and understanding what types of programs are going to benefit us here, right? Like, let's not use an
Right.
Excel spreadsheet to track
Right.
progress on month
Right.
end close. Let's use a tool that can
Right.
recopy the calendar
Right.
and all the workflows and check
Right.
it, and then you have that all electronically. Everyone can log into it. It's locked,
Right.
so you can't change the style. Like, let's
Right.
use these tools. They're just smart tools, right? We're using it on our smartphones all the time. So why not apply it to how we run business? And so I think from a CFO perspective, your job, or your, as you run accounting and you're in charge of it, your job is to then break it down in simple terms so people aren't scared about trying to use it, because they feel like they're not going to have control and some
Right.
robot's going to come and take over their life. It's not that. You want me to do
Right.
more with less, and you want the information faster. So
Uh,
here's how we can go and do that.
right.
So that's my
Got
take on it, I guess.
it. Got it. Great. Thanks. I mean, for clarifying the general understanding of artificial intelligence, and more importantly, you mentioned a very interesting point, right? There's a problem statement, and you can automate that particular problem statement, right? That product, the automation can involve anything. It can involve something as an artificial intelligence. It can involve machine learning. It can involve workflow automation. It can involve everything. The focus is on solving the business problems, and not thinking that AI is a threat, actually using it to solve your,
Yeah.
making your life better, right? Completely agreed on that point. And one last question, pertaining to your, I mean, the viewers over here. There are multiple people, finance professionals, who are, seeing the podcast. What would be your piece of advice for them? Maybe two, three pointers of advice, how to actually shape their career, and with regards to reaching up to finance leadership position, how should they train themselves towards it? How should they work it out
Yeah,
to
I
become a
think one of
finance
the
leader?
things that finance people specifically, when there's a shortage in accountants, there's a shortage in our pipeline of people wanting to come into this field because it's historically, I don't want to work those long audit hours. I don't want to be beholden to the month end
Right.
schedule, and it's so boring. Like, what are you doing? You're just bean counting. That's my favorite one. Someone walks by bean counter, and I'm like, I don't count beans. Finance can be so fun. And I think, in that light, my personal mission, I think, is to help bring light that you can have a great career in finance and still have a balance and a life outside, and really bring value to the organization. We're not just like a money sucker. You can't be a CF no, a CF,
Right.
and that's like a term that I love. It's like when someone's like, are you a CF no or a CF yes? And
Right.
I'm just like, I'm a CFO
Right.
or a finance leader with possibility. Like, let's win, but let's win
Correct.
smartly, right?
Right.
And to get there,
Right.
you have to be able to design a life and then show that to your team that it's possible to still walk out smiling
Right.
every day and happy about it. And I think that takes intention for you to come to work in a certain way, and then also show, hey, here's how we're going to organize our stuff, here's how we're going to drive our life and
Right.
our schedule. So, I mean, biggest
Right.
takeaway is, don't count out the career of finance and accounting. It's not as bad as people think. So the pipeline, we've got to work on that as a team. One of the other things that I would
Right.
say is be curious. And I think that has done me
Right.
wonders. It's, you come out of school
Right.
and you know all of the things. We're smart. We come out and we all
Right.
have barely passed intermediate accounting. It's super technical stuff that we're learning, but the building blocks are so simple. It's really, how do we do transactions? How do we interact with people? And be curious about it, because the more you come out and you say, I know this and I know this, you don't really know. If you come at it with a curious mind, people are
Right.
more apt to share with you, and then you learn more, right? And I think that has
Right.
served me well, and it was just like, well, why? I'm not really sure why. Can you explain that to me? And maybe some, I can definitely say, earlier in my career, I would have felt stupid saying that, because you want to know and you want to show that you know something. But there's power in saying, I don't know. Can you walk me through that? And be curious
Right.
and ask them questions. And the more you ask, ask the right questions. There's a difference, right? Context to it, and the why you're asking. But coming in there with a curious mind to everything, expands it so much because you can see and apply and pick, oh, I did this here and I did this here, and that's how they do it. Maybe we could use that in manufacturing, or maybe I could use that in retail.
Right.
And it's, I
Right.
mean, I don't know. I just get excited when I'm like, oh, that's how they did it. How does that apply to this business? How can that work? How can we get more efficient by doing the same thing? And one of
Right.
the, I think understanding yourself is probably the most important thing. Working through
Right.
it. We talked about it before. Is like, saying yes to everything in the beginning, but then you know what to say no to, because you've said yes to so many things. You
Right.
know that's not going to work for me, and that didn't work before. Here's what I know is going to happen, and then you
Right.
get the ability to have that domino effect in your mind when you're sitting in an executive meeting and someone's saying, "We're going to implement this and do this, and go live date is this," and you're like, "Nope, let's think about this first. Have we thought about this?" Because you already know the
Right.
ramifications because you've seen it, you've heard about it, you've
Right.
been curious before. And so you can
Right.
have that chain effect in your mind of how that's going to affect the books and the finances at the end. So I
Right.
think in a hodgepodge of an answer there is be curious, and finance is not so
Yeah.
boring. That's what I think.
Right. No, I think the finance is definitely not boring. That's where some of the great minds are being recruited and leading teams at multiple companies. I've seen a lot of, I mean, one of the smartest people are from finance teams, and I've worked with finance leaders. I have been myself been a part of finance teams. So totally agree, finance and accounting are not boring because that the devil lies in the detail. You understand finance, you understand books, you understand things, you can actually work on the
Exactly.
strategy base. So completely agreed on that, right? And be curious. And I mean, as you have been curious, right? Across your industry, you have across your experience, you have been curious. You have, and that's one important things you said, right? You say yes to things, you also understand implicitly what works and what does not work, and then you start saying no to things because you understand or not know. Maybe you say work out a way whether they should work or not work, not say yes directly. So that's a learning that you have worked on, and you are where you are. You've achieved a lot. But it was great speaking with you, and I can go on and on with you, and we had a great chat. And thanks for coming onto our podcast and being the season opener for us, and sharing your thoughts, sharing your insights, sharing a lovely your lovely experience, and bringing on your, most importantly, your positive vibes and to
Well,
the
thank you for
discussion. Thanks
having
for
me.
being a part of
Appreciate
it.
it so much, and good luck as you continue your journey with Flow. And so excited to watch it grow
Thank
and see how it continues to
you.
grow and help others. Yeah.
Thanks, Rich. Right. Thank you. And so we bring towards the end of our first episode. Stay tuned for the next episode where we'll be keeping on, covering new topics, and just stay
Thank you.
tuned.
Bye
Thanks
bye.
a lot. Bye.